The Modify Curves section of the Edit Curves menu has a lot of different tools that you can use to, well, I guess as the name suggests, modify or change your curves around. I'm going to go ahead and talk about all of these in this single video because they're all fairly simple and easy to use. For starters, we'll begin with Lock and Unlock Length, which is available to you using the temporary hotkey L, and by temporary I mean that you have to hold it down as long as you want the effect to be in place. Let me go ahead and create a curve using the CV Curve tool. So just add a few CVs like so. And let's grab the control vertices. Actually, let's grab the curve itself. And I'm just going to hold down the L key. And notice over here in my curve shape node that lock length appears. If I hold down the L key, you'll see that the lock length is on. As soon as I release the L key, that disappears. Now, using the actual menu to come in here and modify curves and switch on lock length is going to kind of reverse the toggle because it'll just switch that on. The next time you hit the key, you'll switch it off. And then from that point on, it's the same way. You hold it down, and as long as it's being held, you actually have the effect. Now, what this is going to do is limit the total length of the curve. Now, we've all moved CVs around in a curve. So when I move this CV, you know exactly what to expect. You know, the curve will kind of stretch out. If you lock the length of the curve, then what you'll end up with instead is this. The curve is actually going to react very similarly to a rope would in a dynamic simulation. I can pull on it. Notice the beginning stays anchored in place. I can't pull this end piece any further, and all I'm doing right now is holding down the L key. Now I can grab that CV at the beginning, and it'll behave a little differently. Notice I'm sort of dragging the whole rope around, very much like dragging it around on the floor. So it's very useful when modeling if you know you have a specific length you have to work to and you need to reshape a curve. Moving any of the CVs in the middle will allow you to change the curve shape, but notice that the length itself isn't changing. Also notice that as you get toward the middle of the curve, some of the CVs are going to be a little harder to pull around because you are limiting that overall length. So a very, very cool feature indeed. And really that's going to cover lock and unlock, so two of the tools are out of the way. Now we also have straighten. Now let me come over here. I'm going to delete out this curve and we'll create another one. And let's make a curve that looks like it could use some straightening. Now, as a quick reminder, a lot of these tools that you're going to find under the Modify Curves menu are going to be more effective on curves that have more CVs, which kind of makes sense. The more detail you have, the more of an effect you'll have using tools like this. Now, if we switch over to this Straighten options box, you'll notice that what we have is a straightness amount and whether or not you want to preserve the length of the curve. Now, if you have preserve length on and you try to straighten this out all the way at 1, notice your curve goes completely straight. If you pull this down a bit, you're going to get a less of a straightening factor. So you'll notice as I keep clicking apply, we get straighter and straighter. But because preserve length is on, the curve is the exact same length no matter what I do. Now if I switch off preserve length, you'll see the curve straighten out, but something different is happening. Notice that the endpoints aren't really adjusting that much. Their positions are staying exactly the same. That's the whole key to preserve length. If you switch on preserve length, your curve is going to straighten based on the first segment of the curve, like so. You can see that first segment kind of pointing off in this direction, like so. So as I straighten, we move more and more into that direction. However, if you have preserve length switched off, instead of following the initial direction of the curve, you're just going to be using the endpoints, and you'll straighten based on that. So the curve gets straighter and straighter like so. This is not changing the number of CVs in the curve. It's more or less just lining them up. Now from here, we also have smooth, which is, I guess you could look at it kind of like straighten. It's going to take some of the jagginess out of a curve. So let's make a real jaggy curve like so. Then we'll go under Edit Curves, Modify Curves. Let's go to the Smooth option box. And really what you have in here is just a smooth factor. This is how much smoothing do you want to apply each time you run the tool. So a factor of 4 is really going to smooth things out quickly. Notice the end points are not moving in the curve, staying exactly the same. And if we bring this down to 1, of course we get less smoothing, so we have to click it more times to get the same effect. Very, very simple. Now from here we have Curl, which I'm going to actually use a different curve for this. Let's take a curve that's primarily in a straight line. Now, I'm going to hold down the Shift key as I create points. I'm just going to create a lot of points. It'll really help show off what this tool can do. Actually, I'm going to keep them all a nice straight row. Start clicking too fast. Okay, so there's our nice straight line curve. Let's go over to Edit Curves, Modify Curves, come down to Curl and open up the options box. We have Curl Amount. This is how tightly each curl is going to be curled. And Curve Frequency will control how many curls you end up with. So at the default settings, here's what we get. And if you look down the curve, you can see that it is indeed curly. Now, the help file is going to tell you not to reapply curl to an already curled tool because you'll get poor results. So don't do that, but you can see here that I'm still getting basically some bigger curls. I don't know if it's necessarily bad results, but maybe not exactly what you're expecting. So if I increase the curl amount, boom, you'll notice the curls get larger. If I increase their frequency, you'll notice the curls will end up being closer together. And that's really all there is to it. So just a way to make a nice curly Q sort of curve. Okay, so let's make that go away. What comes next from here? We have bend. Actually, let me bring that curve back. Could come in very handy. Let's grab Modify Curves, Bend, open up the options box. We have Bend Amount and then Twist. And what this is going to do is bend your curve in a single direction. So as I click Apply, notice we just bent the curve around. So that's a value of 0.2. If I lower this, notice we can go negative. So we're now going in the opposite direction. And, of course, that was heavily negative, so we went pretty far. And just bending the curve around. Now, the twist value is going to allow you to change that direction. So it goes between 0 and 1. And you'll notice that as I change that, we start to bend upward. By adjusting your twist as well as your bend amount in positive or negative, you can bend this curve in really any direction you like. Although, I got to admit, in most cases, I would find it easier to just go ahead and bend it along the grid and then snap my pivot point back to the base of the curve and rotate it if I needed to choose a direction. But that's just me. So there's bend. What else do we have from here? We've got modify curves, scale curvature, and for this, it would help if I had a nice curvy curve. So let's make a curve that's got some curves. Looks like a fun road to take a motorcycle down. Okay. Now let's go to Edit Curves, Modify Curves, open up Scale Curvature, and you have a scale factor, which is how much you're going to either multiply the amount of curvature you have or kind of detract from it. And then you have max curvature. This is the maximum angle that two points of the curve can actually meet one another. So the greater this is, the more curvature you're going to allow. The lower this is, the less curvature you're going to allow. So if you have like a really curvy curve and you have the max curvature set pretty low, it's going to start removing some of that curviness because you're basically telling the curve, I only want you to have so much curvature. So let's see, as I apply this, I'm doing something kind of interesting because I am increasing the curvature in this case, and I'm lowering my max curvature because that's a pretty curvy curve. So let's see, that's with curvature set to 1.1, which means every time I apply this, my curvature gets greater. If I set this down to something like 0.7, my curvature is actually diminishing each time I click the mouse because this is like a multiply value. Think of this scale factor number as what you're multiplying the total curvature by. So you'll notice as I have this set to anything under 1, I'm actually straightening the curve out. And that makes sense because you're kind of dividing out the curvature. And that's really all there is to it. It's just several tools under the Modify Curves menu that are going to allow you to make very cool changes to your curves. And that's really everything I have to cover. So that'll wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.